edition. I hope all of you are doing well. And to answer your question, I just saw Zoe, you put in the chat. It is. We just started recording, so you should see that on your screen. Thank you all for being with us on your lunch period, wherever you are in the country. We really appreciate this. So without further ado, we're going to get right into it because there's going to be a ton of information coming at you, but also we want to leave enough room for Q&A. So let's get started. So first of all, before we jump into all of the madness and who we are and who they are and what this project is about, I want to say thank you so much to our sponsors. I want to say thank you to our title sponsor, Green Theory, Joel, who is on this call, who I want to say to all of the listeners, um, uh, he is going to have a wealth of information on how to build this planter box. I also want to say thank you to our funders for this project, the Mississippi Rivers One, and they're amazing, and then also the National Wildlife Federation, and then our partners, Cicada Radio and ASLA Louisiana. So thank you all for making this possible. It would have not been, literally we wouldn't be able to do it without them. So I want to really emphasize thank you to our sponsors. Um, and so I'm going to jump right into it. Some of you may know who I am, and some of you have no idea who I am. My name is Jessica Dandridge. I'm the Executive Director of the Water Collaborative of Greater New Orleans. Who are we? We always get that. We also get confused with like water collaborator, and people think we do all kinds of things, which I wish I had the capacity to do it all, but I don't. We help communities live and thrive with water. And we do that by one, really emphasizing the importance of natural and green infrastructure to reduce the impacts of climate change and also be a tool for social and economic liberation. We don't just see natural infrastructure as a way to just impact or reduce impact around climate change as just a tool for adaptation and mitigation. We see it as a tool for helping residents, for helping communities thrive in various levels, whether that's obviously reducing flooding or heat island effects, but also really thinking about the economic opportunities for jobs, for the ability for communities to continue to thrive in those opportunities, whether that be on with their business, DBEs. There's so many opportunities out there that's a whole different presentation, but that's the entire purpose of our organization, is to really talk about these issues, educate on them, really promote policies locally, statewide, and federally around green infrastructure and natural infrastructure. And lastly, promote equity by getting more local residents, people of color, BIPOC communities in this work and the variety of options that are available to them. And on the left, you'll see all of the events we do. We do mixers, we do educational seminars, we do workshops and lunch and learns with professionals. And the bottom right one actually is a local farm here in the Vietnamese community that utilizes green infrastructure as a tool. And she's actually holding a loofah. So I just want people to know what that is. It's really cool. So just again, that's all the work that we do. I'm not going to get into the weeds of it. And, some of you may wonder, well, where did you guys come from? But we go way, way, way back. Obviously, New Orleans was founded in 1718. And the struggle around drainage in Louisiana and how to manage a unique delta that is unlike anywhere else in the country has been a struggle since the French arrived in the 1500s. And really, New Orleans did make a lot of strides around the wood screw pump and canals that has allowed the expansion of Southeast Louisiana into other parishes. And so that was a marker for us. The other one is obviously Hurricane Katrina, where we had to kind of revisit, what are we really doing? Is it all about levees? Should we actually change the way we view our levee system? Should we incorporate natural infrastructure into our systems? And that allowed for the Dutch dialogues and the urban water plan to take place. And that actually going to the Netherlands and traveling across Europe really changed the perspective of a lot of practitioners here in Louisiana who didn't really have a good understanding of like, oh, I can actually do this and that. These things don't have to be one or the other, they can be both. And our organization was born out of those conversations. They said, the founders of the organization said, we need an organization to continue on this work. And that's exactly what we do. And then in 2020, as a response to COVID-19, we actually expanded our mission to also include water justice and advocacy. So that includes thinking about water affordability, water access, and quality. And we realize with residents and communities that they don't just think of water in a vacuum. It's not just about flooding. It's, can I afford my water bill? Can I drink my water? Can I trust it? And a lot of recreation, park space, and access to using the water for um, um, growth and for canoeing and kayaking and all the things, fishing. We want to make sure that water is a good space. And that's why we like to say at the top, live, thrive, love water. Because really, we want to love water as much. So, why are you here today? This is our second annual one. We are so excited. This one's much more challenging, I think, which we'll learn from Kenneth and Joel than last year. Last year was like a teaser. This one's actually much more challenging, but we are so excited to see what comes out of it. This challenge was again created in partnership with Joel and some other folks, and it was really, really, really about bringing designers, creators, engineers, architects together during COVID-19 and really challenged them to think about the relationship between communities, infrastructure, and climate change, as well as other issues. And so, what you see here is one of the applicants from last year, Garden Pails, which did make it to the top five. And then below is actually a photo of the installation of the winning design. And so these are just some of the amazing things that have come out of. We had a ton of applications last year, so much so that judging took a lot longer than we anticipated, but it was all for the best. So what's actually happening this year? I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm going to leave it to Kenneth because he has all of the details. But our client this year is the Grand Bayou Atacapata tribe. Based in Plaquemines Parish, and we actually met with them, and they're a phenomenal group of people with so much love and so much pride for their community. But they are unfortunately at risk of sea level rise, saltwater intrusion, and then Ken is going to talk more about the river diversion projects, which all that to say it makes them hard to grow food and vegetables. And so the goal is for this particular project is to build something to kind of withstand all of the natural and man-made issues that are going to be impacting them. And what you see actually is the main corridor of the Grand Bayou tribe in Plaquemines Parish. And some of what you see as well is impacts from Hurricane Ida. They're still rebuilding, and this is again how this community needs to thrive is by actually building planter boxes that are resilient to tropical storms and hurricanes as well, which we'll talk more about. So what is this challenge actually talking about, right? This is all about integrated water management. How do you combine the economics, the ecological, the social? How do you get all of those things together? So the big themes, the challenge is about resilience, functionality, community, food sovereignty, food safety, and sustainability. There's a lot of themes in this one. And again, that's why I said it's pretty darn challenging. So with that being said, our first speaker is Kenneth Ballinger. He's here. He's wonderful. He actually went with us to the Grand Bayou Tribe recently. We had a wonderful time. So shout out to CPRA and Kenneth. But he's also going to talk about the river diversion projects. Again, we have Joel Franski. He's a managing partner at Green Theory. And then we're going to have Galen Williams join us a little bit later, and he's going to talk about designing in the ecology of Louisiana. For those of you not from here, y'all know it's hot, it's humid, it's sticky. How do you actually grow something in this environment? And also, how do you build something that's not going to fall apart? I will say that even though we had lots of amazing designs last year, a lot of folks didn't think about the struggles of the environment and the ecology of Louisiana. And because this particular planter box is going to be in the water, it is going to be really, really important for you guys to think about that. So without further ado, I'm going to stop talking. And again, if you guys have any questions about this particular project, feel free to drop it in the chat. We would love to answer your questions. And I am going to hand it over to Kenneth. Kenneth, you can go ahead and unmute, and I'm going to turn off my camera.
Thank you, Jessica. Let me find my presentation. There we go. All right. So make sure everybody can see and hear me. Yes.
Kenneth, I don't know if we can hear you.
Okay, good. So anyway, I'm Kenneth Ballinger. I'm with the Coastal Protection Restoration Authority here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Kenneth, can you hear us?
Yes, I hear you.
I think your volume is a little low. We can't hear you, or maybe you need to put headphones on. I heard you really good earlier.
I don't know anything about headphones. Hold on. Let me see what's going on here.
I hear him okay, if that's of any.
Okay. I'll get closer
Oh,
to the
everybody can
microphone.
hear. Okay, well, it's just mine. No worries. You go ahead and keep talking, Kenneth. I apologize.
That's all right. Sure. Kenneth Ballinger with the Coastal Protection Restoration Authority here in Baton Rouge. And our job is to restore the coast of Louisiana and help protect it. And so our client here, as stated, is the Takapaw Eshak Shawashi tribe. They're actually Native people here, a part of the Chittamauga tribe that's through the south part of the United States. They're essentially our clients. And where you see the star there, that's where our site is. And you can see where the delta of the Mississippi River, all funnels down into Louisiana. And over the past, hundreds of thousands of years, essentially, the river's been filling in this big hole called the Gulf of Mexico. And every year it floods and drops sediment. And it's just been, that's what essentially the south part of Louisiana is built on, is sediment that comes from all the 30 plus states in the Union and actually a little bit of Canada. So if you follow the star, you'll see where the project is located. And here you see a lot of red. And this is really the land loss of Louisiana that's experienced since the 1930s when they built the levees. This is about how much land we have lost here in Louisiana. And you can see the Grand Bayou area is right in the middle of all this red. So in Louisiana, 49 states are counties. In Louisiana, we call them parishes. Same thing. Here we are in Plaquemines Parish. And essentially, Plaquemines is a derivative of persimmons. You can imagine at one time there were a lot of persimmon trees growing in Plaquemines Parish. Things have changed a little bit, and you'll see. So I want to talk about Plaquemines Parish a little bit. Essentially, it's sticking out into the Gulf of Mexico. And if you ever go down to the mouth of the river, it's just a fascinating place. The lush vegetation, it's all freshwater vegetation, and you're practically inside the Gulf of Mexico. And Plaquemines Parish in south part of Louisiana is just estuaries within estuaries, and it's just full of seafood, fish, crabs, shrimp, and oysters. And back in the 1800s, people from all around the world heard about this area of Louisiana and moved to the southern part of the state in Plaquemines Parish. We have people all the way from Europe and the Far East and different communities that populate many different types of communities of Plaquemines Parish. They just love this environment. It's essentially a subtropical environment down here. We were on a field trip, and one of the elders, she said that pretty much they run the air conditioner almost year round. There'd be 2 or 3 weeks in the middle of winter, they can actually turn it off. But essentially the weather down here is subtropical. It gets down to the 30s during the winter a little bit, but it's only briefly. And every once in a while they get a freeze down well into the 20s. But for the most part, your growing season down here is 10, 11 months out of the year. So a really great environment down here. Down here, a lot of commercial fishermen, go out and use the land out here. A lot of citrus down here. The alkaline soils, the Mississippi River provide great opportunity for citrus, and it's actually warm down here. And charter fishing, you can take charter boats out of the southern part of Venice down in the mouth of the river and go offshore, not too far, and catch fish. There's a lot of sports activity out here and so forth. The highest elevations in Plaquemines Parish is along the Mississippi River on the natural levees. Now the actual levees that were built, it's very flat down here. So we'll talk about Grand Bayou a little bit. And if y'all can see my cursor here, this is the Mississippi River. Now, up until 1927, when they had the big flood, the Mississippi River every year would flood during the spring. You put more fresh sediments, fresh water, and nutrients out into the marsh. Essentially, this area was a freshwater sort of marsh area. It actually had a little more elevation than what it has now. And, they had deer out here, you had rabbits and muskrats, and people could hunt out here, and just a very great area to live in. All the bayous had natural levees along the side. That was the elevated parts where you could actually be out of the water. And so that's where a lot of the houses, and we'll see shortly when we go to Grand Bayou, that's where their houses are located. And just a they could grow out here. They grow farms or, areas, gardens, because it was elevated. It was full of fresh water. That's the tribe would live off the land, off the resources of the seafood and what they could grow and the actual, the trees, persimmons and all that used to grow in the area. And the tribe, they live off the land. The hurricanes would come, but they had a lot of marsh that would protect them from the storm surge. They just learned how to endure the storms. It was a part of nature, and they just, the tribe loves to work with nature. But if you look here at my cursor, there's two levees here. You have this levee that follows the Mississippi River, and that protects the communities from the flooding of the Mississippi River. If you go along the back, there's another levee, and that protects them from storm surges, the people that are inside. And I can tell you, all these communities that from Europe and the Far East that came, most of those people live within these levees that are protected. But the tribe, they like to live out in nature, and that's where they're from. That's where they want to live and thrive. So they're actually are outside, subject to the storm surges and so forth. So after the levees were built in the 1930s, the land started changing. Salt water started coming in. You didn't have the fresh water and sediments and nutrients every year. That stopped. And so the land, as that hole we were filling in with sediment, well, no more sediment to fill that hole. When you build a hole, it slowly subsides when the land has subsided. And now the water's not fresh anymore out here. It's more intermediate to brackish. You're probably 10 to 15 parts per thousand, which is normal. The freshwater vegetation, there's more vegetation that grows in freshwater than saltwater. So when the saltwater came, it killed all the freshwater vegetation, and a lot of those sediments just washed away because it had to be replaced with saltwater vegetation, and the land settled. It was in water. Not much grows in saltwater in that intertidal zone. So the community of plants have changed. It's settled. They can't grow their gardens out there anymore, except maybe right along those natural levees, but those areas have been reduced as well. So we'll go down to Grand Bayou and just show you a few shots from overhead. There's a road that comes from the main road, and there's a boat launch here, but you can see all the houses are located along Grand Bayou and this other bayou here, right along the edge where it's just slightly elevated. Just to zoom in a little bit closer, it's all water accessible. You cannot drive a car here. They do have electricity out here and so forth, but pretty much, you need a boat to get to these places, as we found out when we were down there. Let's go down to the next slide. Okay, this is Rosina, and she's one of the elders. She took us came out with us, told us all these great stories. And we're at one of the elders' house, and you can see it's slightly elevated here. We're on dry land, but it's not really storm surge. But during the course of the year, when you have some south winds that come in, the tides come up 2 or 3 or 4 feet, and this area is inundated. So all that salt water comes up. And again, that's why a floating planter box is needed, because the water comes up, and maybe for a few days at a time, it goes down, and maybe a few weeks later, you have another storm. So the tides kind of vary out here. So just because it's dry here, you see the lawnmower, and they do cut their grass, it does get inundated with some tides. Just a few examples of the plants that we saw here. This is a Haskell basket, given a little elevation. It's a fig tree. This is a red mulberry tree. Most of the people down here, they're commercial fishermen. They get crabs, shrimp, oysters, and fish. That's their livelihood down here, and they depend on it. So, after Hurricane Katrina devastated the area, they had to come back and rebuild. Then in 2010, we had the oil spill. These people couldn't go out and harvest for a year because all the seafood estuaries were closed because of the oil spill. Then here came along Ida, last year, another setback. But these folks are really determined to be out here. And just a few slides, we saw a few that Jessica showed. I'll point this one out on the left. Is their garden. There's some pot, flower pots out here where they try to grow things. I can tell you during the summer, it's hot, 90 degrees, and that sucks up moisture. These plants have to be watered, every day with fresh water. You just can't put a pump on the side of the bayou and put water in there because it's salty. You can see the shrimp boat here. Just everything's, again, it's water accessible only. It's a great place. to live. But here, I just want to show you some of the projects we're doing. We've been taking sediment out of the river and dredging. It's a very costly way of doing things, but it's, what our technology we have, the sand out of the Mississippi River is renewable. Sediment keeps filling up. So we're trying to sort of replicate nature there. And you can see the Lake Hermitage project just north of the tribe. We built this in 2015. It was like 800 acres of marsh. We just opened bids a few months ago for the Grand Chenier Ridge. They'll go actually start dredging probably about a year from now. Again, they're going to pull sand out of the river. We've got another project here that's actually going to go for funding this fall and December through our CRIPR program. And then we have another project we're just starting through NIFWIF, and that's actually rebuild the ridge here and fill in some of these canals here. So, we do have a lot of work going on in this area of the basin and the coast. But the other project I wanted to talk about is the mid-Barritary Diversion. And this is, I've been doing this for 30 years, and we used to start out with small dredging projects 30 years ago, and now we're doing, larger dredging projects. We're getting ready to go to the next level, and we know what's needed, and that's to get the river to do its work again. We know that nature's the best contractor. Getting sediment, fresh water, and nutrients back in the marsh is just, it's needed. And that's where we're headed. That's the next generation. You young people out there, y'all gonna be taking this on. And the challenge with the diversion is, you're going to impact the river. We've got to work with the Corps of Engineers, the shipping industry, but we've got a diversion that's going to come underneath the railroad. We've got to build a bridge for the railroad here. Got to build some locks here to control the Mississippi River and even backwater flooding. And, it can come the other way for storm surge. Then we're going to have to build Highway 23, a bridge over the diversion here. And then there's going to be another levee back here. So there's a lot of work going on. This project's probably going to go to construction in about 3 or 4 years if everything goes right. Just to show you the impact, when you put that diversion there, getting sediment and fresh water impacts a larger area. And so you convert that area from, a brackish marsh to a lot less brackish. You get more vegetation, more biomass growing out there. You get sediments, you get nutrients. Again, we are just starting this phase, and this is going to go on for the next several decades. I think that's my last slide. If you got questions, you can always email me. Here's a link to our webpage. And then on here, all these social media things, we put things out all the time on the work we're doing. So, and that's it. If you got any questions, I hope I went over enough. If not, let me know. We'll get you some answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenneth. And again, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. We'll have a Q&A section at the end. But there's a lot of acronyms Kenneth dropped. So if you have any questions about acronyms or the Diversions Project, or even some of the ways that the Grand Bayou tribe actually grows their food now, we'd be happy to help, or answer those questions, I should say. Kenneth, can you unshare your screen so I can then give it to Joel?
One thing I wanted to, let me point out one thing I think I forgot, is that the tribes, they want to grow vegetables. So like if one grows a lot of tomatoes and somebody grows eggplants, they like to share the crops with each other. They do have a lot of medicinal plants. Actually, they're rescued from this area and are growing with some other tribes, and hope to reintroduce them back into to the Grand Bayou area. So yeah, let me go ahead and unmute. I forgot to say that, but that was, okay, let me go.
Yeah. And and Kenneth, can you unshare your screen and click share screen? And there should be a button at the top where it says stop sharing. There you go. Thank you so much. That was really good. Thank you, Kenneth. I'm going to now hand it over, as I mentioned, to Joel and Mr. Galen. Let me see if I can find him. Let's see here. I can't. There he is. All right. So Joel, do you want to go ahead and get started?
Great. Well, first off, thank you everybody for joining us today and to be a part of the competition this year. It's a great privilege for ourselves to be a part of it and to be able to be a title sponsor on the event. It's pretty cool what we got going on here. So I'm Joel Franski. I'm the managing partner of Green Theory. So just quickly about us. We're a planter manufacturing company. I do a little bit of site furnishings as well, but we're based in Canada. So we actually have our headquarters just outside of Vancouver, British Columbia, and we have another fabricating facility as well in Ontario. And that's where the products for this competition will be manufactured, will be on our Ontario plant for logistical reasons. It's closer to you guys. So as far as what we wanted to chat a little bit about today, and welcome Galen, nice seeing you again, is really about the competition, especially when we look at last year with what we had going on. We had just some really cool entries last year that came in that challenged us both with how it would be built and the functionality of it. But that was something that was sitting on the ground. This is something that's a lot different. We just saw from Kenneth's presentation that the challenge here is much different. This is something that definitely has its challenges in the way of functionality, of the design and the sort of the form of it. Because we need something that's can float or stay out of the water. It can't take on this brackish water, so it has to have its own source of fresh water to be watered. So there's definitely challenges with that. And being that it's close to brackish water, or very close to almost in saltwater type environment, that's very tough on finishes as well. So the functionality that we're going to be looking for this year, I think, is going to be the key, is how this is actually going to function and be able to provide the food that the tribe needs in this competition. A lot of the form and finish, although we definitely want that to be aesthetically pleasing and be something that they're going to want to have around their homes in the community, we really need to have it to function first of all. So what I talk about first is a little bit about to do with materials. When we fabricate for ourselves at Green Theory, most of our product is aluminum, but we use what they call 505-2 with an H32 hardness to it. It is a marine grade aluminum. So it actually is what they'll make just solid aluminum boats out of. So the material itself is very resilient when it comes to exposure to the brackish water, salt water, and just being around a lot of moisture. They do build marine boats out of this material. So the material itself will offer many, many years, even unprotected, of being there. Whereas if we went with like a mild steel, first of all, the weight would be a lot different, but it would rust out very quickly, and the lifespan of the product would be a lot less. Stainless steel may also be an option, depending on what you design, but then keep in mind as well of the weight factor. Aluminum's got a great strength to it for the weight, and great durability when it comes to exposure to the waters. So we lean towards aluminum, but if you design with other materials, it's not saying in your designs there might be you need wood, or there's floats, or there's other things that you think of. We certainly welcome innovation in your designs, but we do have to keep in mind when we're designing for the competition, the product needs to be able to be made in an efficient manner. We had some designs last year that were just like, oh, this is really cool, and it'd be 10 grand a planter to make these. Who's going to use them, sort of thing. So we got to make sure that what we're designing to is really in tune with the usability of it, where it's going to be, and we keep our costs in mind. Now, just so you know, when you're competing, even the winning design will help with the engineering and tweaking that. We're not expecting it to be, when it's presented, it is 100% ready to go. You've thought out every small detail. Our engineers will work with you with the winner to make sure that any tweaks that need to happen to have it be a viable product, and one that can hopefully be repeated, and something that maybe benefit to other tribes or other people in the same situation around. So when we talk about material, we talked about that a little bit. Finishes, typically we powder coat things, and powder coat's got a great salt spray sort of rating, which I mean by that is it's able to handle quite a bit of salt spray to it, but being in it all the time is different. So if it's constantly exposed to a brackish water where there's a constant salt on it, it's hard to say how long that's going to sit there and be looking really cool for. So let's keep in mind when we're designing, some of the aspects might be powder coated, and that would give us some aesthetic and some protection. It definitely is a protection to the metal, but we're just not, being that it's, depending on what your design is, the finish may only last a year or two if it's with a constant exposure to it. So let's keep that in mind when designing. Wet paint wouldn't be an option. It would not be something that would last very long at all in that environment. So anything we do, we would be looking at powder coating, which is no VOC. It's good for the environment as far as the application goes. There's no chemicals that come off it during the spraying process, so it's environmentally friendly that way as well. In your designs and some of the challenges that we get when it's coming to fabricating. So we're the fabricator for the winners, and there is challenges when you're dealing with metal. So I don't know how many of you have actually designed something that's been produced using metal. There is challenges as far as shapes. And so it's great to design something that has big bowl shape that curves and all these interesting things that we may design, but in practicality for fabricating, they're very difficult and might be just too cost prohibitive to actually have it be something that can be produced for the competition. So keep in mind when you're designing, simplicity is sometimes the best. So it's always easy to bend or break metal into different angles. So it doesn't always have to be that everything's a 90 degrees. It can be all sorts of different angles. We can roll metal to make sort of tube and cylinders, and we can have tapered cylinders as well. And then we can think of things that might be involved with extrusion, which is always like pipe and tube, square tube, and things like that. That might be a part of what you're trying to do. So let's just keep in mind that sometimes if we get a design that's too hard to make, it would sort of bring down your rank a little bit in the viability. That's something that for us judges to be able to produce something. And keep in mind too, the watering. That Kenneth was bringing out, the water, it can't be the water that's beside it. So we see those great planters in Kenneth's presentation where there's planters on the dock right beside the water. It's like, oh, you just go over, take a couple scoops of water and they're watered. That's brackish water, and so it can't go in the plant. So when we're thinking about the needs of this tribe, you know, we need to have that fresh water come in to water the plants. So whether the planter is something that's sitting on the water, it's elevated on the water, can be elevated. We know it's the floating planter competition, but there's probably a little bit of room for definition on the best way of actually having that planter for this certain situation. Certainly those pictures that Kenneth presented are very helpful to sort of see where the environment where this is going to live be. So really, I guess I won't go too long-winded here, friends. We're just looking, and especially for the judges, we're looking for the practicality and the functionality of it, I think first, and then the form and finish of it. Definitely important, because we want to give them something cool as well if we can. But keep that in mind. It's really the functionality, because the goal here is growing food for them.
And so I'm going to jump in there, Joel, and say a couple of things before we transition to open questions, because I think it's important. It was a great segue that you're a judge, but as well, I'm a judge and I'm a designer. So I also challenge that, yes, function is important, but I am also very curious of what you all can dream up in aesthetics. A couple of things I wanted to kind of touch on and just make sure you're considering what the client needs. And so we know that the client has this dilemma. They are going to have to figure out a way to continue their culture and grow food, but understanding that the diversion tactics need to happen in order to save the land. So understanding quantity of food produced and specific to what kind of crops. I think we all can agree that different crops grow in different ways. Understanding their palette of what they're growing. How is the design for your planter box flexible enough to accommodate multiple user groups or multiple crops? Also access to those planters. Not everyone is your height. how will people of different accessibilities be able to access the areas of work? Where are they placing their tools? Is it all in one? Could this be something that is flexible and adaptable? If it is indeed floating, how does that function? Where does it land? Is it going to float 10 miles down the road? Is it going to rise and then come back down in the same location? To that point, does the end user have the ability? I know we're about to start the question, but let me finish two more things. Is the end user have the ability to move the planter once it's installed? And then, of course, as the designer, I'm always curious about what's your concept and what's your aesthetic, and how are you storytelling through the design of this planter? How are you telling a bit of the heritage and culture of the people, and also reflecting that they are using this to achieve a goal? And I'll turn it back over to Jessica with that.
Thanks, Galen. And I just want you could keep going, Galen, if you want. I was just letting the folks in the chat know that to let their questions be dropped in there if you want to add some more. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to start.
I thought you were telling me that.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
I think just
I'm good.
I think just one more point. I think Galen brought up some really great stuff. I fully agree there. Is keep in mind too, in the design of this, they have to drain. And that's where if they're sitting in water, just when your designs, think about the drainage as well. We got to get water, fresh water into the planters, but we also got to get it out. And so something to really keep in mind in your designs. And so I'll pass it back. I'm good, Jessica, if you are, Galen, and we can go to Q&A.
Okay, great. I did want to add one more thing. When we visited the tribe, one thing they also said is the ability to move the planter boxes in the water. So one thing that they said that they do is when there's a hurricane or a tropical event, they actually, they all band together. There's about roughly 10 houses that are left. And so they all get in a boat together. They bring their essentials. And so they would love to bring the planter boxes with them because that's their food source, as well as the ability for them to propagate local medicinals. And that's kind of, Galen alluded to that, but they did mention the ability to propagate medicinals because, again, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, due to sea level rise and saltwater intrusion, they have lost their ability to grow things that are important to them for religious ceremonies and cultural ceremonies. And so they want to not lose that if they're hurricane, because if anybody here has been in a hurricane, things start to fly. And so if it's expensive and they purchase it or they're caring for it, they don't want that planter box to go flying off into the middle of the marsh and they never see it again. So that's just something also to note, a way for them to hitch it together, connect it to their boat or their truck so they can take it out of the space. And I see there's lots of questions in the chat. I will also ask Kari, please drop the website link in the chat. If you haven't registered, registration is still open until the 25th. And a lot of the things that we're talking about will be found on the website. You also, again, this is going to be recorded. So if you have a friend that missed it, or if you want to watch it again, you can still do so on our website and on YouTube. So without further ado, I am going to pick out some questions here. What crops in particular are you hoping to grow? And that's from Lisi, I believe. Stewart, I apologize if I didn't pronounce that right. Kenneth, are you familiar with the crops that they like to grow in Southeast Louisiana and particularly the Grand Bayou tribe, or Galen?
Remember Rosina saying they like some of the basic crops, I just said tomatoes and eggplants, some of your common vegetables that, okra, okra grows down here, and they like to grow some of the basics. Again, they like to collect food and they share it with each other. So one might grow this, one might grow that, and they all come together and swap out. I mean, I think it's open to any type of foods. There's some things that grow better during the summer, some grow better during the winter. You have winter crops, down here. Some of y'all up north, your summer crops are our winter crops. Mm-hmm. The medicinal plants, I don't think they really told us what they were, but I know they have them, they're growing them somewhere else. I do remember she told me about this white peach they had grown or developed down there. I'm not saying that peaches are a thing, but they actually took it and the plants, and they moved them to higher ground so that maybe one day they could restore them. But I think it's common vegetables that you go to the grocery store and see. Maybe a few tropicals might grow down there that don't grow anywhere else.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm hearing that there's a bit of flexibility, and I like that. I think there's some due diligence in researching the tribe and researching the culture of South Louisiana. What are traditional things grown? I know if you ask my grandmother, tomatoes and bell peppers and what she calls melitong would be grown often. But there's also opportunities for things that may not be on that list. I think the design challenge is developing a planter that's flexible enough to accommodate multiple things. Medicinal wise, I think there's some things that grow better here, and we can also research that as well. We're going to leave it a little bit open-ended, but I think the challenge is the flexibility.
Yeah.
And so consider that.
I also want to add to that we're going to have some footage from some of our partners that grow. So Sprout NOLA, we have Marguerite Green, who is a judge. She has more information about some of the medicinals as well as some of the other crops that the tribe will be growing. So those videos are going to be recorded videos. Unfortunately, we couldn't get a schedule with them on, but they will be recorded videos that are going to come out later on this month. So again, go to our website. You guys signed up. We can add you to the newsletter, and you can follow some social. We're going to be putting them up on all of those platforms, so you won't miss anything. I see Andreas' question is actually related. I could have asked those together, but how are they harvested? Are they handpicked? And are they immediately placed with within another receptacle? Kenneth, I will just say what I was told by Miss Rosina is that they harvest them by hand. They are handpicked. The main thing that I think is a takeaway is that they actually share their crops with other residents. So when in particular, I think it's important to know is that one person will actually share the crops. Oops, I think my screen, I made a mistake. Sorry about that, guys. One person will actually grow eggplant, the other person will grow tomatoes, the other person will grow okra, and then they will trade throughout the year. They also mentioned that they actually trade with other tribes as well. So if they have like a really big harvest, let's say they have like figs, which is a popular thing in Southeast Louisiana. Obviously that's a tree, but let's just say using that as an example of a product, it will grow tremendously. And so they will trade that with other tribes when they have a product. Am I hitting that on the head, Kenneth?
That's right. Yes.
Perfect. And then I see your question about medicinals. Again, that'll be provided later on in the social media and on our website. So just keep a head up for that. I see CJ has a question about, is there a maximum production cost retail price per planter box? Joel.
Well, I think last year's I think we dropped in around the $2,000 mark was sort of where we landed last year, if my memory's correct on the production cost of last year's winter. There's ways of value engineering from designs, so there is ways of making sure that the cost is doable. But if we try to think anywhere from, it could be that we were able to make them for a couple $100 to, maybe a few $1,000s to make them. So yeah, keep that in mind. We're not looking to make a $100,000 planter here, but we need to spend enough that it's something that's going to work, look cool, and function the way it needs to.
Right. And I also want to add too is that the hope is that there'll be an opportunity with Green Theory to sell them. And one of the things that the tribe had suggested, and I believe other tribes are of interest, is that they want a similar planter box. We're working with the Grand Bayou tribe of Plaquemines Parish, but there are tons of other tribes in that particular parish who are living in the coastal area that are only accessible by boat, who also are in need of planter boxes similar to this. So just pointing that out, that when you're thinking about the cost, think about what could a coastal community afford and be able to actually build into their community or personal budgets. Let's see here. There's so many questions. I can't keep up, but that's a good thing. Medicinals, again, we're going to share that later on in the month, so please stay tuned. Zoe wants to know, and I think Joel, Galen, you probably recognize Zoe. She was our third place winner last year. What do we need to understand about engineering designs to make a planter box actually float? So I'm going to leave that to Joel And Galen, how do you actually make a planter box float? That's the grand question.
I think that's your job, competitors.
I think it's the first part is how do you make anything float? Boat technology. I know there's, airspace, foam, other materials that create buoyancy. I think we first have to understand what displaces enough water to make something float. And I think that is the design challenge.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I love that. They kept it real judgy. They were not specific at all.
But keep in mind, float and drain. So keep that in mind too.
Yes. And then this is another question for you, Joel, and potentially Galen. Does metal have to be incorporated into the final design?
We're a metal manufacturer at heart. So, I mean, yeah, we'd love it if it was the design. I don't know. It's a little bit of a tricky one to approach. Ultimately, we want something that works for the people there. We'd like it if it could. From a personal note, Galen, pipe in at any time here, bud.
Yeah, I'll say something. I think there's certain, pros and cons with any material. One thing that came up a bunch last year was the desire to use recycled plastic, but you have to understand we are dealing with a food source. And so there's certain things that come along with it. Plastic degrades, wood degrades. There's certain pros and cons. So I guess it's going to be, does the cost match the amount of durability that this community actually needs? They need something that's basically part of their livelihood, so something that's durable. And so it's a design challenge. There's ways to make it work with other materials, but you have to really think that out. And we, as judges, will challenge it if we don't think it's going to work.
Yeah, those are good answers. And I agree with that. You want to be careful of the product. I think, again, Margie Green, who is one of the judges, who's a part of the urban farming community here in Louisiana, really stresses that being careful about using plastics, being careful about the soils. Obviously, you guys won't be actually using the soil, but thinking about all of those things is really important because whatever you grow the food in is going to be in your body. Then we have a follow-up question, probably for Kenneth, but also the rest of the group. When hand harvesting, do you expect them to harvest while wading in water or from the land? That's an interesting question.
I think it's up to the person, but I don't see the water's fairly deep out there. So it could float in the bayou, could be on land and float. I mean, there's different ways to approach that. They have boats, they can harvest from boats. I think they want something that's maybe near the house or tied to the house, maybe, but different people have different ways of using a planter box.
Yeah. And I will say that when we went to go visit them, and Kenneth, when we walked into one of the community members' area, he had mentioned that he would want it to be on the land. Yes. But obviously it floods, so there may be maybe an inch of water or 5 inches or 1 foot of water. So it might be a little bit of both, right? Where there'll be dry season where they can just walk out to it, but then there'll be times where they might be ankle deep with water and still having to harvest and share foods. So that's just what I remember.
They live out in that environment, so they're used to it. So they're not averse to getting dirty or wet or whatever because they go out and catch seafood. So they're pretty hardy people.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question, do the planter boxes need to leave the water if they can move? Can we assume that they will be moved while staying in the water? I think I will just say that it relates to the earlier question that they don't actually need to leave the water. That's not what I've understood. But again, the only time they may need to be moved is during a tropical event where the winds get really, really fast. I mean, really 120 miles per hour, faster than that, depending on what category storm you're thinking about. You want them to be able to be moved. That doesn't necessarily mean they need to be on wheels, but if their ability to hook onto something or easily be carried or moved with a boat, I think is what I was told from Miss Rosina. Kenneth, am I missing anything on that?
No, you're right on.
Okay, great. We have a few more questions. So can high school groups compete? Absolutely, yes. So we actually encourage students, high school students, to participate. Last year we had lots of students. In fact, our first place winner last year was a college student. So please, please, please share this with them. If you're high school students, we also encourage you guys to create groups. And the only requirement is that we said we have on the website that you have to be 18 and up. It's just as long as there's an adult supervision. So as long as that's a teacher or somebody that's going to be able to be the one to communicate with us. And then we do advise that you have a landscape architect because you have to use a CAD file to actually make it. So Joel can actually turn your idea into a real thing. So again, it doesn't require, you can, if you want to just reach out to a architecture firm or design firm. I don't know, Galen, I don't know if that's realistic, but I would imagine just go find a landscape architect and ask them to help you with the design.
Yeah, and any draftsman or draftsperson should be able to help as well.
Yeah, exactly. And then we also are partnering with ASLA Louisiana. Danielle Doohy is the president. Is that the right word, Galen? President?
Yeah, Danielle Dewey.
Yeah. So I was going to suggest too, if you are a high school student, but you're having trouble finding a landscape architect or someone who can help you with that, we can reach out to them and connect the resources. So yes, please share that with students. Will the jury only judge the team's construction documents or entire design package? This is a really good question. Would constructed prototypes, test models benefit a submission? Joel, Galen, you guys did it last year. How did you guys feel like the judges judged? What was the most important factors to you?
I think with how diverse the judge team was, everyone was kind of leaned a different way. I know the urban farmers definitely leaned towards the practicality of and the production. I leaned heavily towards the aesthetic and innovation. There was one that I still thought was really, really great, but no one else was on the same page as me. And then Joel, definitely the cost, and he'll speak for himself, but the cost I thought was a big part for him as well, as just the ability to build.
Yeah, I think we felt quite a bit too when we were going through the packages. Some had videos, and there was all sorts of that were great, that really explained the thinking behind the product, which was great. When we understand where your thought process is coming from, it helps us with the judging. So we do look at the complete package as a presentation. So yes, we are looking at all of it, but it really comes down to I'd have to look at how we're weighting and the scoring again this year, but like the functionality and aesthetic that a lot of us look for. But Galen's right. All of us had a little bit of we'd look at someone and Galen might be like, this is great, it's beautiful. And I'm like, can't build that. And so there's always different perspectives that come and look at this. And so the complete package for sure, but it has to be something in the end of the day, something that's usable.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm going to just say we have 2 minutes. We're going to wrap up in a second. If you have questions, still put them in the chat, because what we're going to do is send those over to the judges. So that way you guys have the best ability to make the best product. Again, this is not about, like Joel just mentioned, crazy design. This is actually about building something that people can use. So if you have a question, we want to be able to answer it. So please continue to put those in the chat. We'll copy and paste those and have the judges do that. We have 1 minute left. I just want to quickly share my screen about upcoming dates. So that way you all are aware. If you guys can see, our upcoming dates is registration closes August 25th. I will say we may extend that a week because of a little hiccup in our little schedule, but we still encourage everybody to do it by August 25th. And then September 25th is design day. So everybody has 48 hours to submit their design. Now, I will say you can submit your design earlier, but that is the last day to submit your design. Then we have a public voting period. Last year was very popular. We had over 2,000 votes from all over the country, people voting for their favorite ones. We'll give you guys a little sneak peek and say that this year we did every single one, which was overwhelming. We had 50 something submissions on the website. This year we are using an amazing software called Open Water. which is going to make it a lot easier for you guys to submit your designs, but also for the judges to pick the top 10 designs that they like. The top 10 designs will be the ones that will be public voting or publicly voted on. And then lastly, the winner will be announced October 21st. So that seems like a far time right here, but time flies. In the meantime, feel free to go to our website, waterflowsforward.com, to learn more. Again, all of the things that were mentioned today, a lot of them are on the website. And again, stay tuned. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. We're going to be posting a lot of the content that you guys had asked about the medicinals and the things that they grow. That content is coming soon. So again, I'm just going to stop my screen and say thank you so much to all of the participants. Thank you to our, again, our presenters. Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Galen. Thank you, Kenneth. Thank you again to our sponsors and the people who have made this possible. Thank you to our volunteer, our intern, Una, and our new staff member, Kari. And thank you all. We're going to be signing off. And right on cue in Louisiana, it starts to rain. So that means that we are good to go. The rain has told me that we are in the right spot. So thank you again, everybody, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. And again, if you have questions, feel free to email us. Bye.